slowly as we're getting the first meeting of the RTD Fair and Equity Study going here. So my name is Andy Mountain. My colleague Kaylee Showers and I will be facilitating the conversation throughout the evening here. We'll have plenty of opportunity for questions and answers, as well as some polling coming through as well. What we're trying to do is really break the discussion up into small chunks of dialogue and questions and answers, so that you don't have to listen to any of our experts here drone on for too long before getting straight to a number of the points that we need. So welcome, and really appreciate you joining us here tonight. So let me walk you through sort of just the flow that we've got for the next hour and 15 minutes or so. Really, we've got this broken into sort of 4 key segments here. The first is we want to just ground you in sort of a solid overview of what the study itself is going to focus on, the process it'll go through, the schedule, et cetera. We'll break for Q&A as well as some polling questions at that point. And then we'll get into a discussion about equity and how RTD has really prioritized equity at the nucleus of this entire project. Break again for Q&A as that comes through with some polling there. And then we'll walk through the current fair structure, how it's currently set up, as well as some changes that have been made in the last 3 to 5 years, really with that goal of again, trying to simplify, trying to make it better. But I think there's an acknowledgement, as you'll hear from the team, that there's more that can be done in order to make the system itself easier to use, more equitable to use, those sorts of things. And then we'll round out with an additional Q&A session as we get through. Just so you've got a sense of who you're going to hear from tonight, obviously Kaylee and I will help sort of shepherd the dialogue along as we go through, but 3 key individuals that are really leading this effort for us. One is Chris Quinn, who's the project manager from RTD. He'll be leading out with the parts of the study overview. He'll be joined by Carl Green. Carl will join Chris on some of the overview and also talk through the equity components of the overall program. And Laura Wolfgram is the consultant project manager for the effort. She's done a ton of work with RTD over the years on fairs and how the system itself runs through. She'll be walking through sort of that current fair structure and options for how we move things forward. So let me hit just a few logistical items on how the overall Q&A, polling, et cetera, will work. As I noted, we'll have a number of Q&A opportunities as well as polling opportunities that will come in. Those of you joining us on a computer of some sort, a smartphone device, those sorts of things, within the Zoom webinar, you've got the opportunity to submit questions as well as participate in polls. So you see that third bullet there, those of you that are on screen, where sort of what that poll is going to look like, how you pick your answer. I can guarantee you with butter pecan selected, this is not my answer to this question. We may want to challenge each of our presenters tonight to offer that one up as part of their intros here. But you hit submit, and then what we'll do is we'll present right back to you at the end the overall results. So you'll get instant feedback right along with us about how things are playing through. The other important button is the Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen. So if you look at the bottom, you'll see a number of options there as it relates to Q&A, video, mute, et cetera. That Q&A box is a very important one. This is your place to let us know the information that you're wanting to get out of this meeting. We submit questions at any point. We're going to try and gauge the questions to the topic at hand as we get into the dialogue portions of the evening. But we do want to make sure that we've got those questions coming in so that we are tailoring a lot of the sort of less presentation portion of the discussion to the specific things that you want answered. Those of you participating by phone, if you dialed in and don't have access to a device right now, you'll see there at the you'll see there there is a number that you can call, the RTD call center and customer service center at 303-299-6000. I'll give you that number again. It's 303-299-6000. That number will connect you with the customer care team there at RTD. They can help answer questions, and anything that they're not able to get to, they can get you right connected to the project team so that we can follow up with you as well. So we're really looking forward to a terrific conversation tonight and keeping things as interactive and dynamic as possible. Let me flip it over to you, Kaylee, to get us going with sort of our first questions here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andy, and great to get connected with you all. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. In just a moment, we're going to launch our first polling question of the evening. So as Andy just described, a pop-up window will appear on your screen. Please select the one answer that best fits you and your experience. For this first round of polling, we'd like to understand who's joining us on this call this evening. This information will help us to stay engaged with customers in the community and will support our efforts to continue to expand the audiences we hear from throughout this process. So for the first question, we want to understand what county you currently live in. This will be a lightning round, hopefully an easy question to answer. You'll all be able to see responses shortly, and we'll give you just a few moments to respond. Wonderful. It looks like our responses are starting to trickle down. So thank you so much for participating in our first polling question. You did it. We'll be utilizing this as a way, as Andy mentioned, to stay interactive and engage with you throughout the evening, in addition to answering your questions. For the next polling question, we want to understand how you anticipate using RTD services in the next year. Thank you all so much. Looks like we're trickling down from those responses. Appreciate that. And for our final first round of the polling questions this evening, we'd like to know how satisfied you are with RTD's current fares. And again, these polling questions will be asked throughout the evening. In addition to the questions that you all have, we're looking forward to engaging with you all in this way. Perfect. Thank you all for participating again throughout the evening. We'll be staying engaged there and through the Q&As. Feel free to start asking your questions and entering comments into the Q&A box now, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the evening. But now I'm going to pass things over to the project manager, Chris Quinn, who will be providing everyone with an overview on RTD and this study. Chris?
Thank you, Kaylee. Next slide. Just a few facts that I want to bring up related to RTD, two of which play very prominently into the fare study as we move forward. The first one is that RTD geographically covers a huge service area. In fact, the size of the RTD district is almost twice the size of the state of Rhode Island. The second piece that I do want to point out is the fact that RTD is essentially the sole provider of all transit services within the metro area. That is to say that we run the light rail, the heavy rail, local buses, regional buses, as well as the paratransit services. So as we move forward with trying to evaluate a framework for what future fare structure could look like, these are two challenges that we're going to have in the fact that we do offer such a wide variety of services over such a large area. So among other things that we'll talk about further on in this presentation, those are two things that will anchor all things as we move forward. Next slide, please. And again. So one of the things that we have heard from the public over and over again is the fact that not only does the public think our fares are too high, but also that our fare system is extremely complicated. Not only what fare somebody is supposed to pay, whether it's a local or a regional, also related to the various pass programs that we have. We offer a wide variety of pass programs, but we often hear from the public that it's extremely confusing in terms of who is eligible for specific passes, what is the application process, and it not always as easy as it should be. So one of the things that we'd like to do as we move forward with this fare study is, unlike previous fare studies, we really want to make sure that this is a community, customer-driven process so that we're really hearing from the people who rely on us most, as well as people who could benefit from RTD if they were, if the process were different and they were able to ride with us either because of affordability or simplicity. Another thing, and we will talk about this quite a bit more in the presentation, we also want to have a strong focus on equity. So we want to make sure it's equitable to the general public as well as affordable and very simple. And then lastly, as we weigh the trade-offs of what, as an example, what lowering fares might do, we also want to look at, if we were to say, as an example, lower fares, what would that do to service levels? Would that mean a reduction in service, or what would that mean? But one of the unique things going into this study that we haven't done in the past is we have no specific revenue targets, or we're not assuming any specific revenue targets for how much fares we need or want to get as part of the process. So that opens a lot of options, and we can consider quite a bit, many more alternatives than we have when we've addressed this issue in the past.
Thank you so much for that information, Chris. Now I'd like to introduce Project Manager and Transit Equity Manager, Carl Green.
Thank you, Kaylee. So as Chris mentioned in the previous slide, there are 3 goals driving every aspect of this study. There's a primary focus on equity, and this goal looks to support transit-reliant, financially burdened customers, and to provide equitable and fair access to fares, products, and discounts regardless of race, color, national origin, income status, and for other marginalized communities. Special emphasis will also be placed on affordability and simplicity. And as we looked at potential fare changes as part of this study, our aim is to align our fares with the value of service received, as well as to make sure that fares are easy to understand with standardized discounts and streamlined fare payments. With that being said, I'll now pass it back over to Chris.
Unmute. So for our study timeline, we assume that the study process will probably wrap up in approximately this time next year, so April of next year. But as we move forward, our next steps throughout the spring are to gather feedback on the current fare structure, and this is the first community meeting that we are having. We are having a meeting next week, a Spanish language meeting. And then as we move into summer, we will start our second round of community meetings. And with those, we will start sharing the information that we have received to date on fare structure options. And we'll take the information that we received from those meetings, come back to the public in the fall timeframe, and really start discussing in a little bit more detail what these options would mean and what are the trade-offs if we go with various options. Our intent then is in early 2023, so early next year, we would then have some draft recommendations that we could take out to the public for a public hearing process. And then once we have come upon a final recommendation, we would take that to the RTD Board of Directors, probably in the April-ish timeframe of next year. And that would, after that, we would have the ability to move forward with the new fare structure process, or new fare structure policy, sorry.
Thank you, Chris and Carl. Now it's time for you to ask the questions. We want to know what's top of mind. So again, just a reminder, you can begin answering your questions into that Q&A box now, and we'll be monitoring. The project team will be answering your questions here. We have a large group with us this evening, so we are so pleased to see everyone engaged. We're going to do our very best to answer as many questions as possible. But first, we've got another round of polling for you all. So in just a moment, another window will appear with a polling question related to improving fares. Specifically, what is your biggest fare-related challenge related to riding RTD? Give everyone a few moments to respond, and I'll be sharing the results of this poll this time. Starting to see the responses coming through. Looks like understanding when to purchase a local, regional, or airport fare is leading the charge. Fares are too expensive. Give people a couple more moments to respond, but it looks like fares are too expensive is the top answer related to biggest fare-related challenges. All right, let's close this poll and share the results. So you all can see, thank you again for participating in this. It's really helpful for RTD to understand this feedback from the community, so really appreciate it. Let's go to the next polling question. If you could improve RTD fares, what change would you make? And while you're responding, we're going to take a look at the Q&A box. Thank you for asking your questions there. Answers are coming through. It looks like for this one, making fares less expensive is definitely top of people's list. Improving fares, providing the same discounts for seniors, individuals with disabilities, youth, and low-income adults. Wonderful. Now I think it's time to get to your questions. We've got quite a few coming through. So Chris, I'm going to pass this first question over to you, but anyone from the project team, please feel free to jump in here. Our first question from Don is, would you consider a discount on the annual pass?
Yeah, so in the past, we did have an annual pass, and that was discontinued as part of the fare structure change that we did back in 2019. One of the barriers that we found related to that was very few people had the money to be able to upfront pay for the full year's pass all at once in January. However, I do want to emphasize, as we said before, we're open to all ideas, so that's certainly something we could look at again as part of this study. So short answer, yeah, it's certainly something we can look at.
Thank you, Chris. Next up, Bill, I'm coming at you. What are the current RTD sources of revenue other than fares? And anyone from the project team, please feel free to jump in too.
Yeah, I can get that. So.
I can get it. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, so our primary source is sales tax. It covers about 60% of our revenues. In the past, pre-COVID, fares range from 15 to 20%. Now it is a lower percentage, I think in the order of around 8 to 10%. And then the other sources beyond that are grants and then other miscellaneous revenues such as advertising.
Thank you, Bill. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. This one I want to pass over to Chris. Is RTD considering eliminating fares completely?
Yeah, we're not sure if this is one of an alternative we would move forward. As part of the study that we are doing now, we are looking at other systems that may have implemented fare-free policies just to see how that it's worked for them. One of the things you may remember is during the height of COVID, we did have a fare-free period. Not quite sure if it had a significant impact on our ridership or not, but something else that we would like to emphasize, as Carl noted, when we're looking at equity, that is one of the things that we're also looking at is what are the things that we can do to improve the affordability for our low-income passengers, and whether that's a reduced fare program, but want to look at other ways that we can address the affordability issue without necessarily moving completely to a fare-free system.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you all for your questions. Please keep sending them through. We are going to move on, and that's a perfect segue to our next topic, defining equity at RTD. But again, we'll continue to monitor your questions and answer them either live or in the chat box. So I really appreciate you all engaging. So now I'm going to pass things back over to Carl Green, who will be discussing equity at RTD. Carl.
Thank you, Kaylee. and good evening, everyone. I'm sure our community attendees may have questions on what is equity and what is our approach to achieving equity. So I'll take a few moments to explain, and I just wanted to also mention that in addition to serving as the Deputy Project Manager, I also, my Monday through Friday is Transit Equity Manager in the Civil Rights Division. So this is something that I am very passionate about, and I know a lot of my teammates within the organization are also really excited about this project, especially as we look at equity and what this means for this study. So equity is a core principle of RTD's mission to provide mass transit service in the Denver metro area. On a fundamental level, equity refers to the fairness with which benefits and burdens are distributed. For RTD, that's our programs, that's our services, and ultimately the way we structure our fares. A key aspect of understanding equity is to define who's more likely to receive more of a burden or less of a benefit given the circumstances or lived experiences. An equitable mass transit system shall work to distribute the benefits and negative effects without regards to race, color, national origin, or low-income status. This principle is detailed and reinforced by federal law, specifically Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and an executive order pertaining to environmental justice. The intent of Title VI is to remove barriers and conditions that prevent minority and low-income persons, as well as English language learners, from equal access to public goods and services. In effect, Title VI promotes the fairness and equal protection of the law, especially as it relates to our customers. Next slide. Or actually, stay there, please. The Federal Transit Administration requires transit agencies to assess whether proposed fare change, so what we're doing with this study, would have a disparate impact on minority populations or a disproportionate burden on low-income populations. So disparate impact and disproportionate burden specifically relates to our Title VI policies that is required by the Federal Transit Administration. And to measure these potential impacts, a fare equity analysis, as you know in the first opening slide, it's the system-wide fare study and equity analysis. So that last component is where we're utilizing these Title VI policies to ensure that we are minimizing or mitigating barriers and to increase access and equity. And our targeted community engagement will also help inform the fare alternatives as well as any mitigations. Next slide. All right, so customer engagement, again, is at the forefront of this study with an emphasis of hearing from all of our populations, but specifically and including those often underrepresented. Our extensive engagement process includes a multitude of public involvement opportunities for our customers and the community at large. An integral and first-of-a-kind approach at RTD is through collaboration with community partners to engage underrepresented populations. RTD has established community partnerships with community-based organizations to extend our reach throughout the service district. This inclusive approach will make sure historically underrepresented populations are represented, where their perspectives are included, and to address any pain points within our current fare structure and to ensure that they are not adversely impacted by any potential fare changes. So as you can see, in addition to this customer and community meeting in English, we're also looking at language access and effective communication. So we are conducting customer and community meetings in Spanish. We are, again, ensuring language assistance measures are part of this study, such as a Spanish version of the Fare Study website. We are translating surveys in Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese, and we're also providing language assistance for other English language learners. Again, we're driving forward with effective communication to ensure that communication with members of the public with disabilities is effective and that there's opportunities for their participation in this study. And then lastly, we have formed 3 feedback panels. We have an equity feedback panel, a past program feedback panel, and a jurisdiction jurisdiction feedback panel. Again, these feedback panels, the ultimate goal for these feedback panels are to utilize customer and community input. So part of your response to the polling questions, the questions that you are asking that we are responding to, we want to make sure that that feedback to us at RTD to help inform how we're meeting our study goals, how we're fulfilling customer and community needs, and to ensure that we are balancing trade-offs among all of these goals as well as our customer needs. So lastly, I hope everyone here tonight is just excited as I am tonight, and how RTD is doubling down with community engagement as part of this very important study. Your voice matters, and we look forward to connecting with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carl. It's time yet again to hear from all of you, and thank you for these informed questions that are coming through. It's going to be hard to get through all of these, but we're going to do our best. We so appreciate you staying engaged. Just a quick plug for our next community meeting, which will be hosted in Spanish next week on the 28th, and other awesome engagement opportunities that are coming up for you to stay engaged in this process. We so appreciate your engagement tonight and are looking forward to continuing to engage with you in the future. So before we get into your questions, we do have another round of polling questions that we're going to ask are related to equity. So our first question, do you believe that financially burdened customers should pay less for transit fares than higher income customers? You should see the pop up on your screen. Give everyone a few moments to respond. Seeing some quick responses, some strongly agrees and agrees coming through. And just to let everyone know, we are joined by over 50 people this evening, so really appreciate all of your participation tonight, and a full room of people engaged with this study as we kind of kick off the public engagement. So it looks like we've received a decent amount of responses, so we're going to end this poll and share the results. Strongly agree. Thank you for that response. Our next polling question, do you believe that RTD fares should be more affordable even if it results in less service? So again, this goes back to the trade-off conversation that Chris queued up. And for anyone that's phoning in, we're seeing the results here kind of mixed on this one. So some strongly agrees, we're at about 11%, agrees kind of kicking it off with 23%. The jury's still out. It looks like it's pretty evenly mixed. People's thoughts on this question here. Disagree is coming out as the front runner for this one. We're going to end this poll now and share the results. And again, for those of you calling in, the question was, do you believe that RTD fares should be more affordable even if it results in less service? It looks like about 32% of the participants disagree. All right, now I'm going to kick it over to Chris or Bill for our first question for this round. So either of you feel free to jump in. Will this study look at fare capping or pass earning schemes? Scott would like to know.
Yeah, so when we're talking about fare capping, what we mean by that is at once, as an example, if we had a monthly cap on fares, once you've paid a certain amount of fares which are equal to what a monthly fare pass would cost, and that isn't the case if you have either an electronic ticket or one of our smart cards, automatically you would stop, the system would stop you from being billed. And we are very excited to report that later this summer, well, we're in the process right now of implementing a new fare collection system that we're referring to as account-based ticketing, and that will allow us to leverage our current mobile ticketing as well as a new smart card that we're introducing, and that will allow fare capping. As I said, we expect this to be implemented sometime in the summer timeframe, probably August. And like I said, we're very excited because we know that this will provide an additional level of affordability for our customers. And this is happening regardless of whatever the outcomes of this particular study are.
Thank you, Chris. The next question is a comment, but I'm going to pass this over to you, Carl, for your thoughts. Andrea says, my main concern is equity, which begs affordability. We owe the low-income community every possible move up or opportunity to move up. Response?
Yes, thank you for that question and comment. That is something that us here at RTD is really double downing on as it relates to equity. And as we think about our alternatives to our fare structure, there's a lot on the table that we will be considering. And the one thing I did want to mention that we have our low income fare program, which offers discounted passes for folks at 185% of the federal poverty level. So that is a discounted program that we're looking at refining and revamping. So that is top of mind, especially as we think about equity and affordability. And also on the table is potentially lowering our fares. So that is something that is top of mind. Equity is definitely top of mind here at RTD and is part of this fare study. So we look forward to increasing the opportunities for equity to drive it home. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. And I'm don't mute your mic quite yet. I've got one final question for this round coming at you. Silas wants to know, are there any plans to raise the upper income limit for the LIVE program to better match the cost of living in the Denver metro area?
That's a great question. One thing that I'll mention, as just different transit properties across the region define low income in different ways. And whether it's 150%, 185, 200%, etc. And as we define low income using federal poverty guidelines, what is real to the actual folks in the community? So I know that's something that we will look at potentially as far as the upper income threshold, as far as whether that moves up or what to 200%. That's something that's on the table that we will examine throughout this fare study or as part of this fare study. So potentially, yes.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for your questions yet again. We have several more moments for Q&A throughout the evening, so please continue to ask your questions and we'll continue to answer them. Now I want to pass things over to Laura, who's going to provide some information about the current state of fares, programs, and beyond. Laura?
Great, thanks, Kaylee. So I'm going to walk through at a very high level RTD's current fares. As many of you are aware, RTD has a pretty complex fare structure, and this is in part from RTD having to balance simplicity and complexity in the different needs of customers. As Chris has mentioned earlier, it's a very large service area. There's a lot of variability in how customers are commuting, what uses they use transit for. So there are differences in the length of trips. There's differences in the trip purpose and the frequency of travel. And so RTD has tried to take this into account when they've set their fares. They've also, as we've mentioned about the LIVE program, thought about, trying to alleviate some of that financial burden for some customers, as paying the fare can be more difficult for some customers than for others. And so as this, fare structure has evolved over time, RTD is right now taking a step back and really trying to assess, how the fare structure is meeting customer needs, how it can maybe reassess and improve its fare structure, whether it's making things more equitable or affordable or simpler. And so we're really interested in getting your feedback, and I'm really appreciative of all the suggestions you guys have given today, because this will kind of be a really exciting opportunity for RTD to really reevaluate its fare structure and look for new opportunities. So on the next slide, we've got kind of an overview of the fare structure. You guys have noted it is kind of complex, especially when we look at the rail system. So RTD has kind of 3 different fare levels. They have local, regional, and airport. The rail system is divided into 4 fare zones. And so the fare for rail trips is really based on the number of zones you travel. And so if you travel in 1 zone or 2 zones, you're paying a local fare. If you travel in 3 zones, it's regional. And then any trip that goes out to the airport or starts at the airport is priced at the airport fare. And this really requires the customer to figure out what is the number of zones they're traveling, to figure out then what is the appropriate fare that they should be paying, what's maybe the appropriate pass that they should be purchasing, and how, if they go out of their zones, think about whether or not they need an upgrade. Bus also has kind of the 3 different fare levels of local, regional, and airport. Most routes are really local routes, which makes it kind of a simple process. However, RTD has higher fares on its regional and Skyride routes. These also include, for example, the Flatiron Flyer. And so on these routes, and some customers might be taking a shorter distance trip, customers can pay the local or regional fare for those shorter trips. However, this really requires kind of a confusing process where the customer must tell the operator hey, I'm getting off before the trip is complete. They have to do this before they pay. The bus operator then has to think about where that customer boarded and where they're saying that they're going to be getting off to figure out whether or not the customer should be paying or can pay the local or regional fare. So it is kind of an onerous process, not only for the customer, but also for the bus operator. On the next slide, we kind of go through a lot of the different products that are available. As I mentioned, there are a lot of different customer needs. And so RTD has really introduced a large number of products and discounts and fair payment options to really kind of meet different customer needs. However, at the same time, this really creates a lot of complexity for riders. So on the right, you'll see kind of, this is what bus operators, for example, and your transit security officers have to kind of get familiar with. These are all the different products that are out there and different passes. And so, you know, RTD over time has really kind of introduced a lot of the passes to meet kind of different customer usage and travel patterns. They've also introduced, for example, the Eco Pass, the Neighborhood Eco Pass, and the College Pass to really kind of also incentivize ridership by kind of getting passes out to participating employees, neighborhood residents, and students at participating colleges. As we kind of touched on in the prior section about like the LIVE program, there are also a number of discount fare programs out there. Prior to the 2019 fare change, all of the fares were discounted at 50% for seniors, persons with disabilities, and youth. But as part of the PASS program working group and the PASS program study, it resulted in the introduction of new rider category discounts, in the kind of reevaluation of what the discount levels are, and really also looking at more inclusive discount categories. And so as part of that fare change, the LIVE program was introduced. Another notable change was also actually for the youth. So as I mentioned before, it was a 50% discount. The discount was actually increased for youth to 70%. And then eligibility was also expanded, because previously you had to be enrolled in K-12, and they kind of moved it to an age-based youth category. So anyone ages 6 to 19. So it was meant to be kind of more inclusive of those who might not be in a traditional K-12 type school. There's also been a number of fair payment media options over the years. Most passes currently are still paper. But as Chris mentioned, there's a new fare collection system that's planned to be rolled out later this year. It's really building off of the RTD's current mobile ticketing app. It will introduce a new smart card that will kind of use the same kind of account back end. It has a lot of new functionalities, as Chris noted, about fare capping. That's been something that we've heard, I think, since the first fare study I was involved in, with the fare change that was implemented in 2016. So RTD is really, really excited about that capability. And as Chris noted, kind of the implementation is later this year. And some more details about what the new capabilities of that system will be and how those will be rolled out will be kind of discussed at that point. And then my last slide that I wanted to kind of give an overview, because this often is something that not everyone fully understands, is kind of the 3 PASS programs that RTD offers. So there are 3 programs. There's Eco Pass, which is for employers. There's a Neighborhood Eco Pass, which is for neighborhoods or residential developments. And then there's College Pass, which is for participating colleges. And so the real primary purpose of these programs is really to get passes into people's hands, to really promote ridership by giving them access to those passes. And so by giving everyone a pass, it makes it much easier to choose transit. What's unique about these passes is that you have to purchase them for everyone who is eligible. These are kind of all-in universal annual passes, so you have to buy them for all your employees or all of your students. This really helps keep that cost of the individual passes much lower than the cost of passes that are available out there to the general public, since not everyone will use their pass. And so unlike you going out and purchasing a monthly pass, you know, you kind of know what your behavior is going to be. You're making the best financial decision for yourself. But with an employer, they might have some employees that are going to use their pass, some won't, some will use it a lot. So while these passes may appear discounted, they're really priced based off of actual use by participants in prior years. And this was a major outcome of the prior FAIR study that was the past program study that was completed and implemented in 2019. So really this transition to utilization-based pricing where RTD kind of uses the cash fare to figure out what the pricing should be. And so this RTD takes track of the number of boardings that are taken over the course of the month and kind of figures out what the equivalent cash fare would be in determining that program pricing. So that was the last piece I wanted to talk about as far as kind of the current fare structure to kind of level set a little bit. And now I'm going to hand it back to Keely and really look forward to your feedback and comments. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. And on that note, we've got quite a few questions related to the PASS program that I want to start off with. Before we do any polling, we want to answer your questions. So for this first question, Chris, I'm looking at you. Richard wants to know, are there any plans to add monthly or annual or even weekly passes to the MyRide card?
Yes. Yeah, and in fact, that's being done, something that's independent of this particular study. So yes.
Thank you. A short answer. I like it. Short and direct. One more question for you, Chris. Have you considered a card, or has RTD considered a card for all youth under 18, similar to the My Denver card that's used at rec centers?
Yeah, having a kid, I love the My Denver card. So yeah, I get the attraction. It is certainly something that we can consider as part of this program, or as part of this process, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've got a couple polling questions for you all related to the information that Laura just shared with you. So for the first polling question, do you believe to make fares easier to understand that RTD should have the same fare for all bus and rail services, regardless of how far you travel? And I think this question gets at some of the comments that we've been receiving in that Q&A box. Thank you all for participating in that way. Please keep them coming. We're going to try to answer questions. We've got some good time for some general Q&A after this. Seeing the responses coming through, seems a little, jury's still out here for this one too. Some strongly agrees. So again, the question, do you believe to make fares easier to understand that RTD should have the same fare for all bus and rail services, regardless of distance of travel? We've got neither disagree or agree coming in at number one response here, about 30%, 32%. Some agrees and strongly agrees, 25% and 21%, less disagree and strongly disagree. So it looks like for the most part, people agree that RTD should have the same fare regardless of distance of travel. So we're going to end this poll and share the results. And again, so everyone who's phoning in can follow along and engage. The question was, do you believe to make fares easier to understand, RTD should have the same fare for all bus and rail services, regardless of how far you travel? Came out with neither agree nor disagree as the top answer at 33%, followed closely by agree at 27%. And for our next polling question, do you believe to reflect the difference in service amenities? So for example, comfort, speed, frequency of stops, RTD should have a different fare for bus than for rail services. Pretty evenly divided right now. We'll see what the results tell us when we close the poll in just a moment. Looking like people disagree with this one. So again, for those phoning in, the question is, do you believe to reflect the difference in service amenities such as comfort, speed, and frequency of stops that RTD should have a different fare for bus rather than rail? All right, let's end this poll and share the results. It looks like 43% disagree with that statement. So they do not think that to reflect the difference in service amenities that RTD should have a different fare for bus and rail. So 43% disagree, 25% neither agree or disagree. And that is the final polling question of the evening. So now for the rest of the time together, we want to dedicate our time for you all to answer your questions. We've been getting quite a few in the chat. So I'm going to go back over to the question box. And Carl, I'm coming at you first. I believe you typed an answer to this, but if you want to expand, someone in the question asked, does equity include the unhoused?
Yeah, so just to expand on that comment, and I'm not sure if the response went directly to the person asking the question, but just to speak to it more broadly. So the primary focus of this study is centered on Title VI protected populations by virtue of federal law and what's required from the Federal Transit Administration. So that's race, color, national origin, and to include income status. But as part of our efforts to ensure inclusivity and of other marginalized communities, we're making sure that we are receiving feedback from people experiencing houselessness, LGBTQ, veterans, youth, seniors, the gamut of, we want to ensure that we have diverse representation. So yes, to answer your question, unhoused people experiencing houselessness will be part of this study. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. I have one more question coming at you right now. Someone wants to know, has the idea of family pricing been considered?
That's a great question. It could be potentially something that's on the table as part of this study, but that's what we're here for tonight, is to collect this feedback. And if there's any ideas that are out there from our community members and our customers, that is something that we can consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Just as a side note, we are so thrilled with the response that we've been receiving tonight. We've had close to 70 people participate, and about 50 people are actively engaging in the Q&A box. We really appreciate it. We definitely want to get to more of your questions, so please consider adding in questions, comments now that you've received the full information from the process. Chris, for our next question, I'm coming at you. Jose wants to know, is getting rid of paper passes, especially for monthly passes, an option? Seems like that would simplify the monthly pass options.
Yes, certainly something under consideration. And I also want to, my apologies, I kind of misspoke on one of the previous questions related to the mobile weekly pass. Right now, that is not something that we're moving towards unless this particular study were to move us in, one of the outcomes of the study moves us in that direction. So wanted to provide that clarification. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Bill, this next comment I want to share with you in honor. We received a comment in the Q&A box that says, the questions don't really allow our coalition of 35 community, small business, faith, and neighborhood organizations to express our preference for fare, free transit and for improving frequency and reliability by transit access and mobility and clean air for all being a top priority at CDOT. 20 to 40% of the people in each community don't, can't, or shouldn't drive, according to this research. Transit and active transportation are affordable and more equitable ways to invest than road widenings, which research shows are unproductive. I know that's a lot of information, Bill, but wondering if you can respond. Any other project team members as well?
And I think Chris addressed this at one level previously. I think, the issue of free fares, again, we've had some experience with that recently with COVID and kind of when we suspended fares for a while. And like Chris said, that was a different time. We are, as many of you know, the state legislature is considering a bill, and I think it's likely to be passed, that says that we would give us money to try fare-free transit during the ozone season. So during the month of August, we may be looking at doing that. But I think the challenge for us really is on the fare-free side is it really does provide a fairly significant portion of our budget. And there are also ancillary issues associated with fare-free that, we don't think about. There's safety and security, there's potential for overcrowding, there's other things, needs that we have as an agency that we would have to understand and basically solve for if we were to look at that. I don't think there is the agency of our size and scope in the country that has free fares. We are looking at it though, and I do think we are, going to look at the idea that we may look at a free fare category of rider. I know that there are some out there, particularly LA Metro recently has done some work on that, targeting fare free for, I believe they're starting with youth and potentially expanding that. So those kind of things I think are more on the table, but I don't think that we ultimately will end up with a fare free recommendation because, again, resources and other kind of externalities that would impact us as an agency.
Thank you, Bill. Chris, someone in the question box wants to know, can RTD please consolidate down to one discount level? Having 4 different tiers, i.e. regular and 3 discount tiers, in addition to local, regional, and airport is way too many.
Yeah. So short answer, yes, something we are going to be evaluating. So
Thanks, Chris. Also for you, Richard wants to know, good to hear a new smart card system is on the way. Is RTD considering tap on, tap off? So passengers do not need to figure out the number of zones they are traveling through.
yeah, unfortunately, the technology that we have out there now doesn't allow for a tap on, tap off type system. So without completely overhauling our fare hardware, we are limited. It's not something that we can do in the near term, but we certainly understand the benefits of such a system.
Thanks, Chris. Bill, I'm passing this one back over to you. For higher education, is there an appetite to combine the employee and student passes, streamline things on both sides of the aisle?
You know, again, we're open to all ideas. I think we'd have to understand, you know, the advantages of doing that. I think, you know, right now, the way I mean, they're 2 different kind of travel markets, and that I think it might be challenging to combine them into one. But you know, I'd have to understand more of what the means is, and then I turn to our experts on the consultant side to say, you know, does that make sense? And then, you know, ultimately, if we thought it made sense to maybe to do some like fare modeling and other things, but I'd have to get a little bit more deeper into understanding why, what the real advantage to that is, again, because they are pretty different markets.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else from the team care to respond or weigh in on that one?
I think the only addition that I'll piggyback on Bill is just thinking about the structure of the programs for the College Pass program and the Employer Pass program. They're structured a little bit differently, and just thinking on the back end of how it's structured and if there's any realized benefits that can be achieved through through combining these different pass programs. So to Bill's point, I think it's something that we can consider, but obviously there's a lot more groundwork and conversations and discussions that we'll have to ensure that that is something that is feasible.
Thanks for weighing in there, Carl. Chris, this next question, I'm looking at you. Why not a fare reduction for college students? Their budgets stink and they are fluent riders, regular riders.
Yeah, here again, certainly something we can look at. Now, I do want to put out there, though, we do have, depending on the college, we do have the College Pass, but we recognize that not every college and university in the metro area does participate in that. And as part of our outreach, Carl had mentioned earlier that we have particular feedback panels, and one of them is a pass program working group or pass program feedback panel. And included on that are the colleges and universities. And we wanted to include not only those that are currently participating in the College Pass program, but also bring in those that are not, to see if we can get a better sense of, well, what would it take for you to participate in that? You know, what are the things that you would like to see as we move forward?
And just to piggyback on Chris, I did want to mention that at RTD, looking at our College Pass programs, to Chris's point, there is a select number of colleges and universities within the College Pass program, but there have been conversations with community colleges in the past. So something that we're looking at as part of this fare study is how do we simplify the access point for different universities and community colleges specifically? How do they participate in the College Pass program?
Thank you both. Just as a side note, is there a place that people could go to access more information about the College Pass program?
Yes, I'll put it in the link or the chat.
Thanks, Carl. For this next question, there has been a name change for Call and Ride. What is the name used for this RTD pickup service? Is it open to all riders, not just people experiencing disabilities? Is there something similar like the Access-a-Ride? Carl, I'm gonna send that one to you.
Sorry, I was multitasking. I was getting the link.
Sorry, I'll read this one again. Let me try to do it justice. It sounds like there's been a name change for the Call and Ride bill. I don't know if you've got an answer to this one ready. What is the name used for this RTD pickup? Is it open to all riders, not just people with disabilities like Access-a-Ride?
Yes, and the name is FlexRide, and it is a service that is available to all. It is, on a specified designated area that you can book a trip, but it is open to anyone who wants to pay a fare to book a trip.
Thanks, Bill. And I'm going to keep you on unmute. If you could answer this one from Scott. If a fare structure differentiated between service amenities, how would it assess the regional buses that can be more cushy than rail, or the ability to avoid having to transfer?
Those are, again, perfectly good points in terms of those are the type of amenities and advantages that we would look at. And, if there's a, you maybe look at it more of a premium type service, another way to look at it, how do we evaluate that and, calculate the price for that versus, somebody that gets on a normal 40-foot bus and goes just down a major arterial for, 3 miles, and that's what their bus trip is. So again, I think the amenities piece is a part of it. I think the distance piece is part of it. So, but again, I think we're open to all look, and that's why we had some of those questions earlier about just understanding people's, preferences and tolerances for different types of approaches to fares.
Thank you, Bill. I think we've got time for a few more questions, and please keep adding them into the question box. Even if we don't get to answer them live, we'll try our best to type them and integrate them into project materials that will be shared on the website, which is rtddenver.com/fare study. We can drop that in the chat. But for this next question, Chris, Curtis wants to know, any thought given to making bus and rail fares the same? What about lowering paratransit? I know this has been a topic of discussion this evening, but wondering if you could expand.
Yeah, in terms of the, going back to the question Bill just answered from, I believe it was Scott, those are some of the things we're wrestling with. Should the cost of rail, regional bus, and local bus all be the same, or given, as Scott had pointed out, should a customer pay a premium for being on the, the cushy buses that are going longer distances? So yeah, those are the things that we're going to be wrestling with. And as far as the paratransit costs, and I'm going to defer to Carl, because I think I'm not up enough to know on whether or not there's certain federal guidelines we follow with how the paratransit costs relate to our regular fares.
You actually answered it spot on, Chris. There are federal not implications, but guidelines as far as what the structure of fares, or the minimum amount that must be utilized for Access-a-Ride paratransit customers.
Thank you both. And Chris, another question for you. Keanu wants to know, do paper passes expire? Can they still use their 2021 passes this new year?
We may have to get back to you on that. If my memory is correct,
I can answer that.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
Actually, just because I've recently dealt with this. So if you have a pass, if you have a free ride coupon or something that does not have an expiration date on it, but it has a year, anything that was good for 2021 is actually good through 2023, I've understood from our finance department. But if you have a day pass that you receive that has a time and date stamp, that is not renewable. So again, if you have a 10 ride ticket that was purchased in 2021, you can continue to use those through 2023.
Thank you so much, Bill. I think we've got time for just a couple more questions. We do want to leave you all with ways to stay engaged and some next steps in this process. So I'm going to take a question from Richard, and Bill or Chris, either of you, if you could weigh in here. Currently, monthly passes are calendar-based, meaning it doesn't make sense to buy one unless at the start of the month. Are there plans to make them so they expire 30 days after purchase, or prorated for the unused portion of the month? Kind of tagging off of your response just now, Bill.
I'll start out. I mean, I think, one of the challenges that we have is simplicity and understanding that. I mean, right now with our operators, they know the month and they can look at the color and they can look at it and they can easily do it. I think if we went with a rolling month, it might be more challenging for them, but I'm certainly open to it. And I don't know if Laura knows of anybody in the country that's doing that kind of a thing, or all transit agencies around the country just do the monthly pass that's calendar based.
Yeah, so I guess part of the challenge for RTD is just the fact that you guys are kind of paper-based with your monthly passes right now, which makes it really difficult to have that flexibility of having it start based off of when the customer would like to have it start. So that has kind of led to where you guys are at today. And thinking about your new fare collection system, I think there's kind of balancing, does rolling make more sense, or does fare capping make more sense? Because a lot of the agencies that have implemented fare capping and rolling fare capping have had a lot of confusion for customers, because when does that rolling period that I'm accruing towards start? So that's kind of probably going to be one of those trade-offs. I mean, right now, with the new fare collection system that's being planned to be rolled out later this year, fare capping is kind of the way it's being designed, because it makes it really convenient for the customer. And so going to rolling might actually be a step back. And so trying to think about and weigh those two is something that can be considered, but there's definitely, I think, a lot of the agencies that had rolling in the past, it was because they had these magnetic stripe tickets that you actually like swiped through the fare box. And so that way they could just send out a bunch of monthly passes out to grocery stores like King Soopers, and as customers bought them, they could kind of replenish their stock, versus right now RTD has to like send out stock every month to King Soopers. But that was kind of part of why rolling passes have existed in the past. There are conveniences for customers, undoubtedly, but I think it's kind of trying to think about what's next for RTD, and there's a lot of really great things that are going to be coming with your new fare collection system. So,
thank you, Bill and Laura. And I lied. I think we have time for 2 more questions. Thank you all again so much for being so active and participating. We are so appreciative that everyone is engaged in this process and this study as we kick off. This one I'm going to pass over to you, Bill, but anyone else in the project team, feel free to respond. Using the $53 million federal grant that was recently provided, what are RTD's top priorities, such as clean energy, vehicles, improved stops, staffing, in addressing the several issues or concerns that riders are sharing this evening? So
yeah,
Bill,
and again, just for everybody's purposes, the person who asked the question is referring to some of the federal dollars that we recently received. And so what I'll say is, that's up to our kind of budgeting and our board. I know that, it's going towards our budget. But in terms of the specific priorities for that money, what I'll say is that we have ongoing needs, and, we've are going just about ready to start our midterm budgeting process and looking at a 6-year needs. I can say that we have ongoing needs that a lot of that those $53 million could go to a lot of different things because of the challenges that we face. And one of the biggest challenges that we recently tried to address was operator salaries, which, we gave our operators, which they fully deserved, a fairly significant raise, again, to try to stem the tide of the challenges that we have in terms of recruiting operators, because if we don't have operators, we can't put out the service. So that's a challenge that we have, and some of those dollars certainly may be programmed for that ongoing, and those raises that that are going to be looked at over the next several years.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bill. Laura, I see you're typing an answer, but for the final question, in case anyone from the project team wants to elaborate, Don wants to know, is RTD My Ride Pass being discontinued? And if so, is there an estimated date? I'm going to put that out to the group. Bill, Chris, Carl.
So one thing that I did want to mention is we are looking at potential changes to the My Ride card. But then based off those potential changes, we will be transitioning. So it'll still be My Ride, but as we talk about account-based ticketing and fare capping, the My Ride brand, if you will be transitioned for our fare capping and account-based ticketing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl. Awesome. Well, that's an incredible question to send us off into the evening. But first, we've got just a few next steps and ways to stay engaged. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Andy, to send us home.
Awesome. Thank you again for all of the engagement. We try to keep up as close with the Q&A as it was coming in. I think we were able to probably get to 95% of those questions. So I really appreciate the engagement tonight. As Kaylee noted, I think one of the things we're also pleased to see that everybody gets zoomed out in our virtual world today. And what is awesome is the consistency of the participants throughout. Oftentimes in these virtual meetings, we see a spike at the beginning and then people dropping off. And we were thrilled to see sort of the sort of 70 of you and then sort of a core 50 that stayed engaged throughout. So thank you again for that. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Chris, let me flip it to you to offer sort of closing remarks on how folks can stay engaged, what they can expect for next steps, and we look forward to engaging more.
Yeah, so as Andy said, thank you very much for attending tonight. We certainly appreciate the great participation we have had and the questions that have come in. Couple of things that I do want to emphasize. We do have as you would expect, we do have a website up and running. If you don't want to take down the hyperlink that's listed on the slide, you can get to it pretty easily from Google by just entering in RTD Fare Study or RTD System-Wide Fare Study. On the Fare Study webpage, we do have a survey. Some of the questions are very similar to the questions that we presented tonight, but with quite a bit more in depth. And so we're very eager to hear what you, the customers, riders, former riders, we want to know what people are thinking. So please do, if you have the opportunity, take that survey. We do expect that we will be coming back to the public probably in the early summer timeframe for our next rounds of public meetings. And at that point, unlike tonight where we're just introducing what we intend to do and kind of conceptually where we're going, we are going to start being able to share some of the conceptual options that are being developed and get your feedback on that. Lastly, on the website, we do have a comment form that you can enter in any comments you have. So outside of this meeting, whatever, anytime there's something on your mind related to fares, please use that as well. So again, just want to close it with, we really thank you for your time and thank you for your participation tonight.